How's everybody feeling? Good. So I feel like I'm a week behind because it's the first Sunday of Advent. So I should be talking about something Christmas related, right? And last week was the Sunday before Thanksgiving, so I should have been talking about Thanksgiving, right? So I'm a week behind. So I hope that's okay. So when I was getting my degree in psychology, my bachelor's degree, I had to write a thesis, my senior year, senior project, research paper. And I've always been interested in the mind, body, spirit sort of interactions. So 2008, I guess, I was writing my paper on how your emotional state impacts your health. And I had to search long and deep and wide and hard to find research that fit what I was looking at and fit my thesis. And I came across HeartMath. And they had done some studies, which I'll reference in a minute. And then 3 years later, when I had to do my master's thesis, I thought, well, there's no use reinventing the wheel, right? So I went back to my bachelor's thesis and just kind of updated it and tweaked it so I wouldn't get dinged for, what do you call that, plagiarism. I guess you can plagiarize yourself now with all the technology that they have in schools and whatever. And you could find a little bit more research on that. So this morning, I spent my morning digging through piles. I mean, it was on the internet, so it wasn't, piles. But I mean, I could not believe the explosion of scientific research that validates so many of the things spiritually that we've talked about. It just goes way beyond. So it's amazing in the last 10 years, the amount of research that's been done. And some of it I'll get into more in the next service because it fits better with what we're going to be talking about. And we'll see how much we get into today here. But it's amazing. I'm looking at this research, all of it peer-reviewed research, and I'm thinking to myself, do people even know, like experts, do experts even know? Have they even kept up with some of the research that's going on? Because it really is incredibly game-changing. They have instrumentation now that can measure minuscule light waves and quantum fields, and they really have almost proven the interaction between your emotions, your DNA, and the quantum field. It's just amazing, some of the research that's out there. So, having said all that, I want to back up and just talk about how, and again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, but I want to just talk about like simple things, simple ways that we can impact our lives for the better, right? And there's probably nothing that you can do that will make as drastic a change in all the different areas of your life besides feeling good on purpose. Deliberately, non-substance induced, I better qualify that. Non-substance induced good feelings have an amazing effect on everything around you, not just your body, but the whole field of energy that you're giving off, and the way that that field of energy interacts in the quantum field is just absolutely amazing. So the initial HeartMath research, if you don't know what HeartMath is basically, they do a lot of stuff, but their main thrust is to teach people how to get into a place that they call heart coherence. Now, by coherence, they just mean they're measuring heartbeats, heart rate variability, and some of their other research, brainwave patterns. And when they're talking about coherence, they're talking about waves being in sync with each other, right? or mind-heart coherence. Anybody ever felt like you knew way more up here than you do here? Or ever felt disconnected from your head and your heart? Anybody ever struggled with that? So HeartMath has kind of come up with a solution to this, and it's really, really simple and really easy to do. But what they've done is trained people to change their state on purpose, change their emotional state on purpose in a very simple way that creates coherence between the brain and the heart and literally creates all kinds of changes throughout your body. Two areas that have been researched by HeartMath, and then based on what I was looking at this morning, other people have built on the research that they've done. One area is your immune system, the way your immune system is impacted, and the other area is the way that your DNA is impacted. So we've talked a lot about how our bodies produce chemical cocktails. You really do have sort of a pharmacy inside your own body based on the hormones, the neurotransmitters, all the chemicals in your brain, chemicals in your body that dictate how you feel. Everything that you feel, every emotion that you feel is a result of some kind of chemistry that you're sending to your body. That's why every emotion is felt in the body. You never had a feeling that wasn't embodied. Yeah, it's amazing to me in working with people when you ask them, where do you feel that? I mean, it's amazing how difficult it is for people to talk about their feelings. Right? I mean, how many times have I asked somebody, how do you feel? And they give me a concept. Or even our emotions. When we talk about anger, we talk about depression, we talk about anxious, we talk about excited, we talk about joyful. Those are really concepts. Because when you get right down to it, if you're talking about various different structures of feeling, let's take depression, because that's a bigger category. Oh, I've been really depressed. Well, how do you do depression? I mean, how do you experience depression, right? And what you'll do, if you break it down to what the person is actually feeling, where they're feeling it in the body, what they're feeling, what does it feel like, you'll discover there can be a broad spectrum of experience that falls under the label of depression. So technically, nobody ever felt depression, because depression is not a sensation that occurs in the body. It's a concept or a label that we throw over a bunch of different experiences that people have. The problem that we have is when we think that your depression... It sounds funny to say this. The problem that we have is when we think that your depression is the same as my depression. And that's what we do. We throw these generalized labels to talk about our experiences, and then when other people use those same labels, we assume that they are having the same experience that we are having. And that actually can create a disconnect. But the bigger disconnect, not between people, the bigger disconnect that you can have is the disconnect with your own self, in that you are not really, or a person can be not really very self-aware. Not really aware of what's going on exactly inside of them, because they're speaking to themselves and relating to themselves through all kinds of generalized terms rather than in specific terms. Are you tracking with me? So, part of growth and change and transformation, a huge part of it, is just being able to be self-aware and curious enough to explore what exactly is going on inside you at various different times. How are you feeling in various different contexts? How do you feel physically when you wake up? By physically, I'm not talking about, I'm getting older and my back hurts when I get up. I got a bum knee and the weather's changing. And I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about being physically aware of your emotional state. So in other words, you're aware of your emotional state, but you're aware of how you're embodying that emotional state. So for example, if a person's feeling depressed, a person says, I'm depressed, to go back to that illustration, how do you know you're depressed? How do you know? Well, and that question will kind of, get somewhere. Most people look at you for a minute and have to think about it. What do you mean, how do I know? I don't feel good. Well, where don't you feel good? Well, for some people, maybe they have pain. Maybe they feel pain in their heart or in their stomach. Other people, they just feel sluggish and heavy. Other people say, well, I just have no energy, right? I just have no energy and I feel like I don't feel like getting out of bed. Okay, that could be a totally different issue than somebody who is in so much emotional pain that they're thinking, gosh, the only way I know how to end this emotional pain is to use substances to numb the pain because I want to escape my own feelings. Or in worst case scenarios, they might be thinking about suicide, right? Both groups can say they're depressed, but they're dealing with completely different experiences that could be completely separate issues. The person who's just feeling sluggish, maybe, I don't know, they need to take some more vitamin B or get out in the sun some more or change something in their diet. That could very possibly be part of the issue that they're dealing with, right? The other person who's experiencing all kinds of emotional pain more than likely has some underlying trauma or grief that they haven't resolved or dealt with. So that the solutions to the problem that we label depression, excuse me, and think it's the same can be very, very different. Does that make sense? So if you want to change anything, then self-awareness is the key, right? Goodness, sorry. Gotta love this changing weather, right? Or allergy season or whatever it is. You see where I'm going with this? All right, so let's come back to HeartMath and some of the research. So you have what's called an autonomic nervous system, which to a large degree is playing a huge factor in how you're feeling. You have what's called the sympathetic nervous system, which most people understand as a fight or flight response, right? So the sympathetic nervous system gets triggered whenever you perceive a threat. Whenever you perceive a threat is the key. So the other day, I'm sitting downstairs and Elijah's gotten into this thing, my 9-year-old's gotten into this thing where jump scaring is like his thing. And so he comes around the corner, sneaks up on me, and he jump scares me, and I was completely unprepared. And immediately, I could feel my sympathetic nervous system kick in. I could feel that fight or flight response kick in, right? Like that. Then he just starts giggling, right? Now watch how experiences change. Now what happens when you hear a child laugh? Right. So there's a complete change in the nervous system, right? So you have the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is like your rest and digest. So if you want to think about fight or flight being sympathetic, you can think about the parasympathetic as rest and digest, right? So I'm sitting around resting and digesting, just taking it easy in the morning. Elijah comes up. Thank you very much. I think that's going to help. Yeah, that was good. Thank you. Sorry about that. So Elijah comes up. Boom, scares me. All of a sudden now I go into fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system is activated. Ah. Then he starts laughing. What happens? I start calming down and going back into the parasympathetic. And so there should be this balance. It's not necessarily like a binary switch where it's on or off, but there should be throughout the day a maintained balance. Because if you're always in the parasympathetic response, then you're like, you might as well be stoned all the time, right? I mean, you're just like, oh, no energy. I mean, you're not meant to just rest and digest all the time, right? But you're certainly not meant to be in this fight or flight mode all the time either. For most Americans, most people in the Western world, we spend way too much time in the fight or flight mode. This is anytime you feel anxious, anytime you feel angry. Anybody ever been just like irritable? Like just angry, irritable. Oftentimes, the root of that is unresolved anxieties. What's going on the surface is very, very, very seldom what's really going on. It's just what's being presented, right? It's what's underneath that. So underneath that irritability could be a lot of anxiety. Underneath that anxiety could be a lot of unfinished business, unresolved issues, who knows? Things that you are not wanting to deal with. Because one of the ways that the fight or flight response plays out in our lives is avoidance, because that's the flight response. So anger, irritability can be a function of the fight response. I'm ready to fight because I'm feeling anxious all the time. Right? I'm feeling stressed all the time, so I'm ready to fight. Or I just slip into a mode of avoidance. And in some ways, maybe avoidance is worse because now I'm avoiding the thing that I'm anxious about. And the more I avoid the thing that I'm anxious about, the more anxious I get. Right? You see this with college students all the time. They're anxious about a paper, they're anxious about a test or whatever, and so they keep procrastinating it and putting it off. I'm going to go out with my friends, I'm going to play video games, I'm going to do whatever. And the longer they put it off, guess what happens? The more the anxiety about the situation builds. And the more the anxiety about the situation builds, if your strategy is avoidance, what do? The more you avoid, right? So you have all these surface kind of things that are going on when really underneath there could be some bigger issues. And until you're ready to face the bigger issues, these surface issues are going to continue to plague you, right? That doesn't mean that everybody has to go to therapy. It doesn't. It just means that you need to do something to begin to change your state of being. So when you begin to change, so how do I do that? So that means taking time throughout your day to feel good on purpose, non-substance induced. Feeling good. Well, we are in Colorado, for those who don't know. So here's the interesting thing about the studies. So one of your first defenses against disease is an antibody that is made in your saliva. Kind of gross maybe, but it's just the truth. So God made you with little antibodies in your saliva to help protect your immune system. So one of the first things that they did at HeartMath was they taught people how to change their state, how to create on purpose a state of anxiety, how to create on purpose a state of anger, how to create on purpose states of compassion and gratefulness and that kind of thing. And once a person became proficient at it, then what they did was they began to run a number of different tests by having them generate a state of being for a certain length of time, usually a short length of time. Like one of the first studies was 2 minutes. So we want you to be in an angry state and hold that angry state for 2 minutes. And then we're going to take some saliva and we're going to look at it and we're going to see how many of these little antibodies are produced in this sample. Then what we want you to do is generate a state of compassion, a state of love, a state of gratefulness. Those were really the two that they worked with, the compassion and gratefulness. And hold that for 2 minutes, and then we're going to measure the same thing. And then what they did was they extended it after the person had generated those states of being. Then they did the test again, and they extended it over a period of time to see when there might be a change. Are you tracking with me? How it was structured. So here's what they found out. A person who generates an angry state for 2 minutes turns off the production of this antibody in their saliva for up to 5 hours. Turns it off for up to 5 hours. Amazing, right? So 2 minutes of anger potentially shuts down your immune system for up to 5 hours. Compassion, gratefulness, that kind of thing, on the other hand, activated more antibodies in the saliva than just not having any change, just random samples. You see what I'm saying? So we're going to take random samples of however you're feeling throughout the day, and we're going to measure it against when you on purpose put yourself in a state of gratefulness or compassion, and found out that when you put yourself in a state of gratefulness and compassion, that the results were higher. So they automatically know that when you put yourself in a state of gratefulness, when you're feeling grateful, when you're feeling compassionate, that your immune system is stronger and working better than when you're obviously angry, and probably because anger more often than not is a part of the fight or flight response. Also probably, I think it would safe to say, I don't know if they've done studies on it, but I think it would be safe to say probably in a state of anxiety or fear, you're turning it off, potentially for hours. Isn't that amazing? The other thing they did was they looked at the DNA strands, and man, they've done some fascinating stuff with DNA and cells. It completely revolutionizes the model that I was taught, back in the Stone Ages. My kids are like, I mean, it's so funny. I'm sure I did this to my parents too, but like, were you alive when the dinosaurs were on the earth? It's like, are you serious right now? But completely revolutionizes the model of biology that I had always thought existed, right? So they took DNA strands, and what they found was that when a person put themselves in an angry response, that the DNA literally curled up. If they put themselves, and I think if my memory serves me correctly, because I didn't look at this morning, I'm going back to what I did 10 years ago in my research paper, but I think there were certain parts of the DNA that actually turned off. When a person put themselves in a state of gratefulness or compassion, the DNA relaxed and switched on, so it was functioning more like it's supposed to. There was a researcher a few years ago, I think it's been within the last 10 years, who discovered a chemical that the body can produce called telomerase. Now, what telomerase does is it actually is a chemical in the body that repairs the DNA. What they've learned about DNA is that as the DNA gets older, it starts to, the ends of it start to fray. Almost like you could think about your shoelace, when the thing comes off your shoelace and it begins to fray. And so the older your DNA is, the more it frays. So now, not only can they tell your genetic makeup like Northern European, 60% and all this, they can literally now tell what your real age is. So that your age, at least at the level of the structure of your cells, is completely, I don't want to say it's completely unrelated, but it's not measured biologically by how many trips around the sun you've had. It's measured, or can be measured, by the amount of fraying on the ends of the DNA. So there are places now where you can send your DNA in and they can tell you your genetic age is this or this or this. Isn't that interesting? And so the truth is that we probably do more to ourselves when you start to appreciate how linked your emotional state is with your DNA and your body, how much the mind and body works together. We probably do more to age ourselves through our cultural conditioning and the auto-suggestions that we're giving to ourself and to our subconscious mind than how many times we've gone around the sun. I mean, I remember at a very young age, my dad, as he was aging, started saying, I can't remember what goes in the 40s. Thank God. I'm still there. I think maybe it was vision. Sight goes in the 40s. Hearing goes in the 50s. I mean, it's just like lined up for you, right? And maybe you have certain genetic patterns in your family of disease, right? That, in our family we get diabetes, in our family we get heart disease, everyone on our side of the family dies of cancer, everyone relate to anything like that? You start hearing that and seeing that modeled for you at a young age, that is programming. Literally, how do we know that we're not just setting up commands and signals to our body to generate that stuff? If you look at some of Bruce Lipton's research, and he was researching, he's I think a molecular biologist or something like that, and he was doing stuff with DNA and genetics back in the 70s. And he's convinced that your genetics have absolutely nothing to do with disease, that it's the exact opposite of what your doctors tell you. He's convinced that it's all environment and all mental conditioning. So when you're constantly telling yourself, well, it's flu season, I guess it's time for me to get the flu. I'm in my 40s, I guess it's time for me to start wearing cheater glasses. Right? All that stuff, you're sending suggestions potentially to your DNA because your DNA is responding all the time to your thoughts and feelings that's causing your body literally to begin to break down and conform to the messages and commands that you've been sending it daily for years. So what they found out about the telomeres, same thing. If you put yourself in these states of gratefulness and states of compassion, you're releasing to yourself a greater number of telomeres, and the telomeres is helping to repair your DNA. So it's actually literally at a genetic level making you younger than you were before. Pretty interesting, huh? So how great would it be then? I mean, think about the medicine, think about what this could do for you. And this is strictly at a biological level. I'm not even going into what's happening at the electromagnetic field around you as you're doing this. I'll give you one other, this is a teaser for next service, because this is really cool. But they've also developed, there's this whole field of research I knew nothing about until a couple days ago. So, now I'm an expert. Just kidding. Biophotons. Has anybody heard of biophotons? So what they've determined now is that your cells at the level of the DNA are communicating by light rather than by chemistry. And that you're literally giving off a very minute ray of light at every cell of your body that is in a spectrum that you cannot see with the physical eye. There's a researcher that's been doing 30 years of research on this. Pretty amazing. So what they're able to do is measure how much light you are emitting and how that's somehow interacting with the electromagnetic field that is around you. So in other words, they can, because of where this light wave is on the spectrum, they can measure what's coming from you versus what's coming from your environment. This to me is one of the most fascinating things. When a person becomes stressed, when they become anxious, when they become angry, when they become depressed, any of those lower level states of being, the unpleasant ones, they literally are pulling light out of the electromagnetic field to themselves, and their cells are emitting less light. So that literally, if you could think about it like this, there's a light field around you. To produce the stress chemicals, all the stress chemicals in your body, you're pulling energy from the light around you in order to produce the chemistry. So at a very small level, you are becoming less light and more material. So part of the reason people feel heavy today is because quite literally, they're heavier. Not because they gained weight, but just because they're more material. Wow. Isn't that amazing? Guess what happens when you engage yourself in feelings of gratitude, compassion? Guess what happens? You actually emit more light. So what happens? Think about it, guys. When any of those feelings that we talk about, don't they feel heavier? I mean, don't you feel heavier when you're carrying anger, you're carrying stress? Think about the term depressed. right? So any of the perhaps variant feeling, mind-body experiences that people have when they're depressed, but they're heavier, denser. You ever feel like you're just wading through peanut butter? Anybody but me ever felt like that? But when you're happy, when you're having fun, when you're laughing with your kids, when you're playing games, when you're enjoying, when time's flying, don't you feel lighter? Don't we use our language and say, I'm floating on clouds? I'm on cloud 9, that kind of thing. Why do we talk like that? Because we're describing at very subtle levels, at levels of very subtle energy, what we're experiencing and what we're feeling. So if there's all these benefits to feeling better, then wouldn't you want to make yourself feel better as much as possible on purpose? Yes. And that's just talking about that much of the benefits. Here's another one. When you go into a stress response, you're using less. If you're spending a lot of time in stress, what's happening in the brain is the limbic system is literally becoming inflamed. And to some degree, you're bypassing your frontal lobe, which is where a lot of your cognitive, well, most of your cognitive, like your judgment, critical thinking, problem solving, so that when you're stressed, you're actually less equipped biologically to solve the problem that's stressing you out.
Makes sense.
Isn't that crazy? The flip side of that is, when you're relaxed, the inflammation in your brain can go down, and the circuitry starts working better, so you start thinking more clearly about how to solve and deal with the problems that you're facing. Right?
Right.
So let me ask you this question. Most of us end up just being the effect of our environment emotionally. Does it change the situation for you to brood over it?
Yeah.
Has your brooding, and by brooding, I don't mean incubating, I mean,
Can't believe this.
thank you. Yeah, I can't believe this happened to me. Just coming in like, carrying that dark cloud of energy. Has brooding ever changed or fixed or solved the situation? Ever? So why do we do it so much? I mean, I'm just as guilty as the next person. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, but I'm asking myself this question. Why, when there's a bad situation, do we sit there and spend so much time in these negative states feeling sorry for ourselves? Turning off our immune system, shutting down our critical thinking skills, aging ourselves, withdrawing from our own light and energy field. And, as an extra bonus, feeling really shitty in the meantime. I mean, what a great solution, isn't it? I got this problem going on out here. I'm going to internalize it. I'm going to feel crappy, and I want everybody else to feel crappy. Yeah, you ever gotten mad because somebody didn't have a pity party with you? Ever gotten mad? Yep. Like the worst, guys. Just FYI, something I've learned. As a general rule, I'm generalizing. Oftentimes when your wives or, women come to you with their problems, they're not looking for a solution. They don't want an answer. They don't want you to fix it. But what do we do immediately?
Have to fix it.
Have to fix it. Have to give the solution right away, right? No, they want to have a party. And that's not to say that guys, sometimes we don't want to have a party either. I mean, oftentimes the shoe's on the other foot, right? Like I remember, talking about, how positive confession and faith and positive thinking and the law of attraction can, keep you healthy. And so heaven forbid you ever got sick at my house, like me. Like, it's okay for everybody else to get sick, especially back when we were doing like healing and miracles and back in the faith movement and all that stuff. It's like, man, I'd get sick. I'd get no sympathy or compassion in my house whatsoever. Why don't you practice what you preach? Why don't you get up, get out of bed? Man of faith. right?
Yep.
But think about how insane this is. Here's a situation that feeling bad about it ain't going to change it. Getting mad about it probably isn't going to change it. Being stressed out about it and moping around the house definitely isn't going to change it. And getting people to add to the negative energy by having a pity party for yourself ain't going to change it. So you're shutting down your problem solving. I'm going to go through again. You're shutting down your problem solving skills. You're turning off your immune system, potentially making yourself sick. I'm not even talking about what's going on in the digestive system, because that's a whole other nervous system in and of itself, called the enteric nervous system. You're pulling light from the field and making yourself heavier. You're aging yourself. And you're feeling like crap in the process. And you're doing it mostly to yourself by the way you're ruminating and brooding. When all of us have the power to shift over to this positive place of gratitude and love and compassion and undo all the mess that we did over there, be more equipped to handle the problem, and feel better in the process. Right? Like, why do we want, and I get a lot of what we brood about is other people. Come on. If we were all in a monastery or something, someplace independently wealthy, of course. And of course, not all of us there, because then we still have to deal with people. But if we could just be around people that we like and independently wealthy and didn't have to, for the most part, a lot of our stress and problems comes from other people, right? So why do you want to give the jerks in your life the power to do that to you, to literally kill you, to literally make you sick, to literally make you feel like garbage? Why are we so stubborn in doing that? It's partly because it's just a pattern, partly because it's a habit, partly because it's cultural, partly because, to be honest, political systems feed off of discontent. Yes. If you are content with the current administration, you're not going to vote in the next administration. So both sides have a vested interest in telling you all your first world problems and how terrible your life is.
Right. That's right.
It's just the truth, right? Okay, all right. So come back over here. So what they said in HeartMath was the first thing you can do to take control, remember, you're dealing with two nervous systems. Oh, here's another thing that's for free. Remember the story with Elijah when he jump scared me? Like, within 90 seconds, I was feeling better. He starts laughing, 90 seconds. It took a while, okay, let the heartbeat come down, let the adrenaline wear off, right? It took a while, but it probably took maybe a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. So here's the other thing they found, that when you get into a stress response and all those chemicals get released, the norepinephrine, the cortisol, the adrenaline, all that stuff, when all that stuff gets released in your body, that chemistry will stay in your system for about a minute and a half. The reason that we stay stressed is not because of the event. The reason that we stay stressed is because we keep replaying the event over and over and over in our mind, and your biology cannot tell the difference between images that you are generating in your head and stuff that's happening out here. So if you can stop your brain from focusing on those things, then the way you're feeling will eventually literally flush out of your system, because it's a chemical cocktail. Right? So, heart coherence. And I know all of you know this, and I know I'm being a broken record, and I know some of you probably read some of the books that I'm referencing and probably already know all this stuff. But it's good to go over it, right? And I keep hammering home the benefits of it. So here it's very simple. Take control of your breathing. Because the first thing that happens, like when you get scared, when I got jump scares, right? And you'll notice when you're really stressed, you're taking very shallow breaths. Sometimes you're not even breathing. Literally. So if you will sit for a few minutes a day and practice deep, rhythmic breathing. I'm not talking about swimming. Rhythmic breathing, meaning coherent breathing, meaning you're exhaling for the same amount of time that you're inhaling. So you figure out what works for you. I would suggest working up to being able to take very long, very slow breaths to where you're getting about 2 or 3 breaths per minute. But that's pretty advanced. So maybe 4 seconds, and 4 seconds. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, or 1005. And then you let out the same rate. And then I would suggest, just for the sake of memory, whatever you pick, I like 5. Most people can do 5 seconds. Stretches them a little bit. Do it however many times. So if it's 4 seconds, do it 4 times. If it's 5 seconds, do it 5 times. Right? Or keep doing that until you feel yourself calming down. You feel that sort of chemical cocktail leaving your body. Because the moment you take control of your breath is the moment you take control of your nervous system. So that's the first thing. It's physiological. The second thing is simply focus on a memory or an idea or an experience that gives you pleasure. Don't worry about, oh, is this gratitude? Is this compassion? What is this? Simply focus on a thought, an idea, a memory, or an experience that makes you feel light and good inside. That's all you got to do. And then practice holding that feeling for as long as you can. So you get up in the morning. Most of us, I reckon, take showers. Maybe you take it the night before or whatever. But here's my point. You have a ritual that you go through every day to present yourself well to other people, hopefully. Right? Most of us do, unless you're really depressed, I guess. But, right?
Right.
Why can't you develop, and how long does that take? It depends on the person, right? And some people it takes an hour, some people 20 minutes. Depends on how much hair you have. Right? But what if you took 5-10 minutes to present yourself to yourself? To do just some mental and emotional hygiene. To control your breathing and set the pace for the day by making yourself feel good on purpose. And then once you've practiced that for a while, then throughout the day, take little feel-good breaks. Like once you get used to knowing how to feel good, then throughout the day when things get stressful or whatever, you can just stop, take control of your breathing for a minute, remember that good feeling, let yourself feel good, and pretty soon what will start to happen is when you're no longer feeling good, you're going to start to notice it more. And you're going to be so practiced at making yourself feel good, at shifting your state, that you're going to be able to do it in a second. You're not even going to have to take control of your breathing as much. You're just going to have to realize, I'm not breathing. Take a couple deep breaths. Oh, there's that good feeling again. And guess what happens? After a while, that becomes your state of being. I'm telling you that you can take this, completely transform your life, never go to therapy, never do another spiritual exercise or spiritual practice as long as you live, never learn another skill or technique, and drastically improve your life and the quality of your experience. Pretty simple. The benefits are laid out. So then the question becomes, why don't we just do it? Yeah. Amen? I ran over a little bit. I hope it was good.
Thank you.
That's my Thanksgiving message a week late. God bless. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be gone next week. Going to be on vacation. So actually for the next 2 Sundays. Julie surprised me. I thought it was just one Sunday, but she told me on Friday, no, it's 2 Sundays. So I still have to get that second Sunday handled, but next Sunday, I think Jeanette will be sharing in the first service, and Jamie Englehart will be with us. Some of you remember Jamie from a few months ago. Jamie Englehart will be with us in the second service, so he'll be covering for me. So anyway, so I won't see y'all for a couple weeks. I'm going to be feeling good and only some of it substance-induced. So God bless you. Have a great day.